Well, you join me on a fairly stormy day here in Wales, and I was originally going to film this video up a mountain, but there's a lightning warning in effect for the area, so let's not do that. Anyway, I'm here to talk about this, the brand new Sigma 20-200 f3.5 6.3 DG, and this is in L mount. And of the three lenses that they've announced today, this is the one that I'm personally most interested in. Let me explain why. Super zooms are an interesting type of lens because I think there are a lot of use cases for it. They're not going to replace every lens you own because they're always going to be a compromise, but they do have a sort of a special use case or multiple special use cases as compared to other lenses. If you're just taking a camera out with you for the day and you don't know what you're going to encounter, well, it's kind of nice to have a lens that covers a wide zoom range. I mean, equally, you could say, well, take a 50mm prime lens, and that kind of covers most things you're going to encounter as well, on an everyday sort of day out somewhere. But this gives you the opportunity to even photograph some animals, things like that. It can be very useful. And equally, if you're going hiking, well, you don't want to carry loads of stuff. It's going to weigh you down, and you don't need low light capabilities most of the time. You want something that is quite flexible and that isn't going to reduce the distance you can walk, which does happen when I end up carrying 10 to 15 kilos of camera gear with me. And I have a personal use case for these as well. They are fantastically useful for making videos. Now, one major point of difference between this lens and other super zooms is that it goes as wide as 20mm, which is a significantly wider field of view than even 24mm. As you go wider, every millimetre counts a lot more than it does at the long end, for example. Now, there's one niche use case for which this lens is very well suited and better suited to it than the Panasonic 28-200, and that is this, filming your own face. The Panasonic's too tight. You have to stick it on a tripod or stick it on a wall or something in order to film your own face. And if you're the sort of person who likes going on long hikes and you want to film your own face with it handheld like this, this is better suited to that task. 20mm is perfect. And this lens reminds me an awful lot of the Panasonic 20-60, which is a fantastic kit lens because it allows you to do this without having to buy an ultra wide. It just makes it a standard lens that everybody can use for different use cases, including this sort of video. Now, in terms of physical design, it's very much in keeping with Sigma's current trend of design. It's very similar, in fact, to the 16-300 they brought out for APS-C. And it is quite a bit different to the Panasonic 28-200. It's a smaller diameter and it's a bit longer from what I can tell. Curiously, it's a single extension barrel and it extends its own length again, basically. I think there are some advantages to this. I think it's going to be easier to weather seal, and this is a fully weather sealed lens, and Sigma's weather sealing tends to be very good anyway. But it does mean that at the wide end, you're moving quite a lot of glass in the small distances between those focal lengths, and I think that is a little bit easier on the Panasonic 28-200. But on the other hand, it doesn't go as wide as 20, so I might just be misremembering that. comes to bokeh, as you can see right now, I'm at 20mm f3.5 and the background looks very pleasingly blurred. And that's consistent through the zoom range. There's a couple of instances where it can look slightly more busy because there is a subtle soap bubble effect, but overall the bokeh on this lens is weirdly good, especially at the long end. It is very impressive. There's a minor amount of cat's eye as well, and the longitudinal chromatic aberration is very well controlled from what I can tell. It's just generally really impressive. I wasn't expecting that. I'm just hiding from the rain, and while we're doing that, let's talk about the sharpness of this lens. It performs really well across the zoom range, and it only has a slight drop-off from what I can tell at 200mm for subjects in the mid to far distance. This is actually quite consistent with the Panasonic 28-200 that I had before, but that had a more notable drop-off, which I think might have been copy variants, but this is very usable still, and as I said, it's only for subjects in the mid to far distance from what I can tell. This is why I don't shoot focus test charts on this channel, because unless you shoot them at a variety of distances as well as at the different focal lengths, etc., it's not useful because focus or sharpness performance depends on the distance of your subject as well. And with a super zoom of 20-200, I'd be here all week shooting all of those combinations, so I'm not doing that. It's generally very impressive. For a super zoom, I'm very impressed by the sharpness. I will happily use this all the time. For video, I think any sort of drop-offs are irrelevant. No one really cares about sharpness there. For photography, I'd happily use this for landscape photography and the like. I think it's very impressive. As you can see at the wide end, the lens does display some barrel distortion, and as you go through the zoom range, this obviously dissipates. And at the long end, there's some very minor pincushion distortion instead. One more thing to note optically is that there is some coloured fringing on high contrast subjects and in certain situations, but it's quite minor. It's not something I've noticed that much. And curiously, Sigma's fringing colours always tend to be quite uniquely different from other manufacturers, from my experience, and I find them a slightly more pleasing. It tends to be more of a teal in the blue fringe and easier to repair, but I wouldn't worry about it either way personally. I think this lens is a good fit for the S5 II and S5 IIX. It's quite proportional to it, and its lack of an optical stabilizer is offset by the cameras having very good IBIS. However, I don't think it's as good a fit for something like the Sigma BF, and this is what it looks like on the BF. It actually balances surprisingly well, even extended. I think the added weight of the body of the BF is working in its favour there. It's not really an ideal setup, I think. It makes the compact size of the BF kind of redundant, which I guess would make sense, and it is harder to shoot at 200 without any image stabilization using only a screen. I think you'd fare better on the Panasonic S9, which has IBIS. It might mean that the Panasonic 28-200 with its built-in optical stabilizer might be a better fit for the BF, but overall I'd use primes on this instead, to be honest. But anyway, all of the other photos I've taken so far have been on the S5 II. Let's take some on the BF. And yes, I did buy a BF. We'll cover that in another video. Something rather cool about this shop here at St Fagans, and that is that it has an old painted Agfa sign on the side of the building, which I always find really interesting. I'll see if I get a wide angle shot of it, I suppose. Something like that. Stick the aperture up a bit. I believe it was once a photographic shop in a previous iteration. There is in fact another one on the other side, which might be a little bit more interesting. Let's see if we can get some foreground interest going. Yeah, kind of cool. Now this is in Sigma's contemporary line of lenses, and therefore it has fewer features than those in the art range. It has only 2 switches. It's got an AF/MF switch and a locking switch for the zoom barrel, which is very nice to have. But there is no aperture ring here. And that's something that you do notice on the BF because it only has 1 control wheel. But it's not going to be a problem on anything like an S9 or an S5 II, etc. They all have multiple dials. And when it comes to things like video, and in fact for most shooting, I don't tend to use aperture rings, particularly on bigger cameras. I tend to disable them because I find the control dials easier. But on something like the BF, it's nice to have. Still very usable, but something worth noting. Another point of difference between this and the Panasonic lens is its macro capability. Both lenses do nice reproduction rates, but the Panasonic does it best at its widest focal length, whereas this seems to be either somewhere in the middle or at the longer end. That isn't necessarily better or worse, it really comes down to the sort of perspective you prefer, but I do think it's more convenient because you have a better working distance and you don't have to get up quite so close to whatever you're macro photographing. But it is nice to have, and it does make it just an even more useful type of lens. It's what I liked about the Panasonic 2, being able to do close-ups of things. Especially if you're into video, that's a really nice feature to have. So overall, I'm very impressed by this lens. In terms of price, it comes in basically the same as the Panasonic, so it's not cheap, it's £799, but it's not out of the realm of possibility either. And you get a lot for your money. You can replace multiple lenses with this, perhaps. I would personally use this in place of the Panasonic 20-60. It's not that much bigger or heavier, and it gives you a huge zoom range, and still goes to 20mm at f3.5, which is what I found most useful about that lens. I do think this is a spectacularly useful lens for travel, for video, things like YouTube. In fact, I filmed that macro video the other day on this lens secretly, and I found it fantastically useful to be able to do shots to camera, wide angle, close up, and then turn around and point it at an insect at 200mm and get really good magnification ratios. It's just a very flexible, useful lens. It's got a practical filter size. There's a lot to like about it. But let me know your thoughts down below. I'd be really curious to know what you think, if this is the sort of lens for you, or what you'd choose instead. Thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you next time. If you're wondering where I've been filming this video, it's here at the Museum of Wildlife in St Fagans on the outskirts of Cardiff, and it's a place that collects many buildings from around Wales that would otherwise have been demolished, things of cultural importance, and they actually demolish them, they deconstruct them and rebuild them here. It's a very, very interesting place, and it's a fantastic place to come and visit. But the building over my shoulder is of personal interest to me in that it's the Vulcan Hotel, and I went in it when it was still in its original location. And it's fantastic that it's being preserved, but it does make me feel a little bit old because that was something like 17 or 18 years ago.